If you earn a high income and invest to a taxable brokerage account, the return you see on the screen is not necessarily the return you actually keep. That distinction matters. Imagine two ETFs. The first produces a slightly higher gross return but distributes more taxable income every year. The second produces a slightly lower gross return but allows more of the return to remain unrealized and continue compounding. Depending on your tax bracket, the second investment could leave you with more wealth after taxes. That is why high-income investors should think beyond expense ratios. There is another cost sitting quietly in the background: tax drag. Dividends can create taxable income. Interest can create taxable income. Realized capital gains can create taxable income. Unrealized appreciation, on the other hand, generally allows you to control when the tax event occurs. So throughout this video, we are not simply looking for the ETF with the highest historical return or the highest yield. We're looking for investments that can help maximize what actually stays in your portfolio. And for high-income investors, that becomes especially important because the tax rates involved can be substantial. In 2026, the highest federal ordinary income tax rate is 37%. Long-term capital gains and qualified dividends can reach a 20% federal rate for higher income investors, and some investors can also face the additional 3.8% net investment income tax. Then, depending on where you live, state taxes can add another layer. This does not mean every high-income investor pays all of those rates on every dollar. Tax treatment depends on income, filing status, the type of investment income, and personal circumstances. But the broader point is clear. For someone in a high tax bracket, the difference between receiving taxable income today and deferring a tax event for years can become meaningful. That is why low turnover index ETFs tend to be so attractive in taxable accounts. They can generate much of their long-term return through price appreciation, rather than forcing large taxable distributions every year. So if we want to build a tax-efficient taxable portfolio, the logical place to start is with the U.S. equity core. And one of the cleanest options is ITOT. ITOT gives you broad exposure to the U.S. stock market. Large companies, mid-sized companies, small companies, all inside one low-cost ETF. Its expense ratio is only 0.03%, which immediately gives it an advantage as a long-term core holding. But the reason I like a broad, passive ETF in a taxable account goes beyond the low fee. Index strategies generally have relatively low portfolio turnover. That means the fund is not constantly selling appreciated positions and potentially generating taxable capital gain distributions for shareholders. Much of your return can instead accumulate through market appreciation. You still receive dividends, and those can create taxes. So ITOT is not tax-free, but it is structurally much more tax-friendly than many high-turnover active strategies. For a high-income investor who wants broad U.S. exposure without creating unnecessary tax complexity, that is exactly what I want from a core holding. Of course, ITOT is not the only obvious choice. VOO is probably even more familiar to many investors. So the next question is whether going total market actually gives you a meaningful advantage. ITOT and VOO can both work extremely well in a taxable account. VOO tracks the S&P 500, so you are primarily owning large U.S. companies. ITOT goes broader and includes mid-cap and small-cap stocks as well. Both have extremely low costs. Both are passive. Both can be highly tax-efficient long-term core holdings. So I would not turn this into an endless debate over which one is mathematically perfect. The more important question is what exposure you actually want. If you prefer owning almost the entire investable U.S. equity market in one position, ITOT is attractive. If you are comfortable concentrating the U.S. allocation in large-cap companies, VOO remains an excellent alternative. The tax efficiency difference between them is unlikely to be the deciding factor for most investors. Consistency probably matters more. Choose the core structure you understand and can hold through market cycles. Then complement it where the U.S. market does not give you exposure. And that brings us outside the United States, because international equities can offer something interesting in a taxable account beyond diversification alone. VXUS provides broad exposure to stocks outside the United States. That includes developed markets and emerging markets across thousands of companies. Its expense ratio is low, and the fund gives investors a simple way to diversify geographically without choosing individual countries. That diversification is the primary reason to own it. But there can also be a tax angle. Foreign companies may pay taxes to foreign governments before dividends reach the fund. Depending on the fund's reporting and the investor's circumstances, some investors may be able to claim a foreign tax credit for eligible foreign taxes passed through by the fund. That potential benefit can make holding international equity exposure in a taxable account particularly interesting. But I would not buy international stocks simply because of a tax credit. Tax optimization should support the portfolio strategy, not replace it. The real reason is diversification. The tax treatment is a possible secondary advantage. So now we have a tax-efficient U.S. equity core and international exposure. But high-income investors often need fixed income too. And this is where municipal bonds become much more interesting than their headline yields initially suggest. VTEB owns a diversified portfolio of investment-grade municipal bonds, and municipal bonds can be particularly useful for high-income investors because the interest is generally exempt from federal income tax. That tax exemption changes how you should evaluate the yield. Suppose a municipal ETF yields less than a Treasury ETF. At first glance, the Treasury may look better, but if the Treasury income is taxable and the municipal income is federally tax-exempt, the investor may actually keep more from the lower-yielding municipal bond. That is why comparing nominal yields directly can be misleading. VTEB also has a very low expense ratio, which makes it an attractive broad muni market option. State taxation can complicate things because state-specific rules vary, especially depending on whether you own bonds issued inside or outside your state. But at the federal level, the basic tax advantage can be substantial for investors in high brackets. And this is exactly where we need to stop looking at the published yield and calculate the number that actually matters, the taxable equivalent yield. If this kind of investing analysis helps you think beyond the headline return, subscribe to Boring Money Wins and hit the like button. Especially in taxable accounts, the best investment decision is often not the one that looks best before taxes. It is the one that leaves you with the strongest combination of after-tax return, diversification, and risk. And the next concept is one every high-income investor comparing municipal bonds should understand, because a muni ETF can show a lower yield than a taxable bond fund and still put more income in your pocket. To see why, we need one simple formula. Taxable equivalent yield tells you what a tax-exempt municipal yield would be equivalent to on a taxable basis. The formula is simple. Take the tax-exempt yield and divide it by 1 minus your marginal tax rate. For example, suppose a municipal investment yields 3.5%, and imagine your marginal federal tax rate is 37%. 3.5 divided by 0.63 gives you a taxable equivalent yield of roughly 5.56%. That means, ignoring state taxes and other complications, a taxable bond would need to yield roughly 5.56% to leave the same amount of income after federal tax. Suddenly, the muni yield does not look so low. And this is why municipal bonds become progressively more interesting as the investor's marginal tax rate rises. But the calculation has to use your actual tax situation. Someone in a much lower bracket may find taxable bonds more attractive. Now, if municipal bonds make sense, there are still multiple ETF choices. Two of the biggest names are VTEB and MUB, and the difference between them is less about one being universally better and more about what you value. VTEB and MUB both provide diversified exposure to the municipal bond market. VTEB currently has the lower expense ratio at around 0.03%. MUB is slightly more expensive at around 0.05%, but it also has very deep trading liquidity. For a long-term investor buying and holding a normal-sized position, the lower ongoing cost of VTEB may be attractive. For someone trading larger positions or who places greater value on secondary market liquidity, MUB can remain very competitive. The important lesson is that expense ratio is not the only cost. Bid-ask spread and execution also matter, especially when trade sizes become large. And yields change constantly, so today's SEC yield should never be treated as permanent. What I care about is the structure: low cost, strong diversification, reliable liquidity, and after-tax income. Municipal bonds can solve the income problem, but they do not necessarily solve the liquidity problem. For cash reserves and very short-term money, I would look somewhere else. That is where SGO enters the picture. SGOV owns treasury bills with maturities of roughly 0 to 3 months. That gives it very low interest rate sensitivity and makes it useful for money that should remain relatively stable: emergency reserves, upcoming spending, cash waiting to be invested, or simply the conservative part of a taxable portfolio. For high-income investors, there can also be a tax benefit depending on where they live. Income attributable to U.S. Treasury obligations is generally exempt from state and local income taxes, subject to state rules and fund reporting. That can make Treasury exposure more attractive than bank interest or other taxable fixed income alternatives in high-tax states. But SGOV and a muni ETF like VTEB solve different problems. VTEB is primarily about tax-efficient bond income over a longer horizon. SGOV is primarily about liquidity and minimal duration risk. So far, everything we have chosen has been relatively tax-conscious, but there is one category many income-focused investors instinctively love that can become less attractive in a taxable account: high-dividend ETFs. Dividend ETFs like SCHD or VYM can be excellent investments. This is not an argument that dividend investing is bad. The issue is account location. A high dividend strategy intentionally produces more cash distributions. In a taxable account, those distributions can create recurring tax bills every year. Qualified dividends may receive preferential federal tax rates, which is better than ordinary income treatment. But preferentially taxed is not the same as tax-free. Compare that with a broad index ETF, where more of the total return may come from unrealized price appreciation. If you do not sell, you generally control when that capital gain becomes taxable. That flexibility has value. So, for a high-income investor trying to maximize long-term after-tax wealth, I would not automatically choose the ETF with the highest dividend yield. Dividends are part of total return. They are not free money created separately from the investment. And this same tax efficiency logic applies to several other asset classes that may be perfectly good investments but poorly located in a taxable account. There are several investments I would be cautious about prioritizing inside a taxable account when tax-advantaged space is available elsewhere. High turnover strategies are one example. Frequent trading can create more realized capital gains and reduce your control over when taxes occur. Taxable high-yield bond ETFs can generate substantial ordinary income. REIT-heavy funds can also generate significant distributions that may be less tax-efficient than qualified stock dividends. Again, none of these are automatically bad investments. The question is where they should live. A taxable bond fund might fit better inside a traditional IRA or 401k. REIT exposure may also be more attractive inside a tax-advantaged account depending on the rest of the portfolio. This is the difference between selecting a good asset and locating that asset efficiently. And the taxable account has one advantage those retirement accounts generally do not offer in the same way. Losses can sometimes become useful for tax planning. That leads us to tax loss harvesting. A market decline is never fun, but in a taxable account, a loss can sometimes become a tax asset. Suppose an ETF position falls 20%. An investor may be able to sell that position, realize the loss, and potentially use eligible losses to offset realized capital gains under the tax rules. At the same time, the investor may want to maintain similar market exposure through another investment. This is the basic idea behind tax loss harvesting. But there is an important limitation: the wash sale rule. If you sell an investment at a loss and buy the same or a substantially identical security within the prohibited window, the loss may be disallowed for current tax purposes. And determining what counts as substantially identical is not something I would treat casually. This is an area where professional tax advice can be useful. The larger principle is more important than any specific swap. Tax loss harvesting should support the portfolio. You should not distort your investment strategy just to manufacture tax losses. And once we start thinking across multiple account types, this leads naturally to the biggest tax planning concept in the entire video: asset location. One of the most common portfolio design mistakes is making every account look exactly the same. Suppose you have a taxable brokerage account, a 401k, and a Roth IRA. There is no rule saying each one needs the same percentage of stocks, bonds, REITs, and international assets. What matters is the total household portfolio. The taxable account can emphasize broad, low-turnover equity ETFs, international exposure, municipal bonds, and tax-aware liquidity. A traditional IRA or 401k may be a logical home for taxable bonds and other income-heavy assets, and Roth space can potentially be reserved for assets with stronger long-term growth expectations because qualified future withdrawals may be tax-free. That does not mean this exact structure fits everyone, but the framework matters. Asset allocation tells you what you own. Asset location tells you where you own it. Good portfolio construction considers both. And if we bring all of those ideas together, the high-income taxable portfolio becomes surprisingly simple. So what does a tax-efficient ETF framework for a high-income investor look like in 2026? For the U.S. equity core, ITOT or VOO can provide low-cost, low-turnover exposure. For international diversification, VXUS offers broad foreign market exposure and may provide an additional foreign tax credit angle when applicable. For investors in high tax brackets who need bonds, VTEB or MUB can make municipal income worth comparing through taxable equivalent yield rather than headline yield alone. And for short-term liquidity, SGOV can provide extremely short-duration treasury exposure, with potential state and local tax advantages on qualifying treasury income. I would also resist building the taxable portfolio around high dividend yield, simply because receiving cash feels productive. The goal is total after-tax wealth, not the largest distribution check. And finally, I would coordinate the taxable account with the 401k, traditional IRA, and Roth IRA, rather than optimizing each account in isolation. The best ETF for a high-income investor is not necessarily the ETF with the highest yield. It is not necessarily the ETF with the highest gross return either. It is the investment that gives you the best combination of return, taxes, diversification, risk, and flexibility. Because at the end of the day, the number that matters is not what your portfolio earns before taxes. It is how much wealth you actually get to keep.